Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Green Party is very strongly opposed to this bill. It's effectively taking away from workers long, hard-won rights to holidays. And it was just a few years ago, about 8 years ago, that we managed to get a 4th week's holiday for all New Zealand workers, 4-week statutory holidays. We were catching up a bit with other countries, particularly in Western Europe, where they have 4 or 5 weeks holiday already, and that was a fantastic achievement, and I think New Zealanders celebrated that achievement. The National Party was never keen on that. The ACT Party was never keen on that, and they're trying to erode that achievement, and the way they're doing it is to give people the right to sell off the 4th week of their holiday. And the people that will sell it off are the people who actually most need a holiday, the people who are hardest up. There'll be people who are on, say, $13 an hour, maybe 5 kids, no fixed assets, renting a house, finding it sort of quite difficult to make ends meet, and they'll be the ones that will be tempted in some way to sell off their holiday at the disadvantage, you might say a small financial advantage, but at the disadvantage of the rest that they really need, because there'll be people who often work longer hours, more overtime at heavy physical jobs, the people that most need a holiday. And you can be sure that the people at the higher end of society, including MPs like ourselves, judges, CEOs, whatever, who already, even before the statutory 4th week holiday came in, had 4 or 5 weeks holiday, that they're not going to be suffering or trading off a week of their annual holidays, and only reinforce the inequality in that respect in terms of leisure time available in society. And I think leisure is very important. It's a very human thing, a very needed thing, and it is important. I think we are here in the middle of a very difficult situation in Pike River, and while not getting into that issue in terms of what exactly has happened or what caused this particular accident, I think it does draw our attention back to the need to really concentrate on safety in the workplace. And one thing that in general helps safety in the workplace is if people are rested, if they're not overworked, if their minds are on the ball, if they're thinking of all the safety issues on their job, looking after their workmates, etc., etc. And I think in that context we should not be moving backwards in terms of holidays and leisure. The government goes on about choice and how, people will have a choice about whether they sell off the 4th week of their holiday. But in fact, in many situations they won't have too much choice. The employer may want to have the office or factory, whatever it is, open for an extra week, so pressure will be put on a section of the workforce to sell off their 4th week's holiday, and the legislation, they've got choice, they don't need to accept that. But in fact, if you're in a workplace with an imbalance of power and you want to be promoted, you want to, you don't want to be shifted out of a good job you've got in a particular workplace, then, if the pressure's on, I better go along with what the employer says, what other workers are doing, and sell off the 4th week of my holiday. The idea that it is completely choice ignores the relationships in a workplace and the power of employers to work out who's promoted and who isn't and all the rest of it. I think that's something that the government completely ignores and is never discussed through all of this discussion on the Holidays Bill or the Employment Relations Bill. And even if workers sell off the 4th week of the holiday, get a little bit of extra financial advantage, that financial advantage can easily be clawed back in the next year or the next 2 or 3 years by the employer, depending on the strength of the union to maintain wages and conditions. But once you've sold off a week's holiday, it's more difficult to go back to where you started from. The transfer of public holidays from Christmas and Easter, for example, to some other day, I think it's important to go back to what are the good things about Christmas, Boxing Day, Easter holidays. Two things. One, it's the time when families are together. While there's one or two people working in the society, overwhelmingly people have the time off, can travel to be with their families, and that's fantastically important for families, for communities. The second good thing of having not many people working on Christmas, Boxing, Easter, etc., is it means there's a quiet time. It's great on an Easter period or Christmas period going round, the shops aren't open, it's just an unusually quiet time, a relaxing time, and I think that's welcomed by a lot of people in the community. And the more we have this transferring of holidays, the more people will be working on Christmas Day, Easter, etc., and it's tied in with the attempt particularly of National and ACT MPs to allow shops to be opening on Easter Friday or Easter Sunday or whatever. It's tied in with more and more people working on those days, and this enticement of will trade off your holiday, and it won't be necessarily voluntary again because of the power in the workplace. People tend to go along with what the employer's pushing for. In fact, it might be the employer that's wanting a day off on Christmas Day, etc. Oh, well, could you just transfer your holiday and you can come in and keep the place open on Christmas Day? The choice idea doesn't actually apply in practice. The question of having a sick note, the employers being able to require a sick note for one day's absence. Now, the Minister in her introductory speech said, this will only happen where employers genuinely suspect that there's something dodgy going on. Genuinely suspect. Well, if she really believes that this will only happen when there's a reason to generally suspect, why did she remove the words in the Holidays Act legislation that said that employers could, if there are reasonable grounds, then require a sick note for one day's absence? Of reasonable grounds being if someone took 5 consecutive Mondays off or whatever, and instead she's changed the legislation not to include genuinely suspect or the sorts of words she used, but just to say the employer may require proof of sickness or injury within 3 consecutive calendar days. Full stop. For any reason whatsoever. Specifically removing the 2 words reasonable grounds. So I think she's not really telling explaining what's really behind this bill when she says that employers will only require a sick note if they generally suspect something. And she also says, employers won't do it because they won't do it unjustly because they all want good relations with staff. Well, that is the problem. Unions exist because often they're bad employers that don't have good relations with staff, that do things unjustly. We're not in a utopian world of all good employers, and often employers don't like unions, so they will harass a union leader off the job, perhaps by requiring a sick note every time they're off. That would be a tactic. If I was trying to get the union off the job, I would use that tactic. Why not? Why not? Every time they're off sick, say you've got to have a sick note. That's what happens. You're living in a utopia if you think that all employers are great and want good relations with staff. It's just, la-la land. And what we really need is to go in the opposite direction so that people don't need to transfer their holidays, sell off their holidays, give workers, particularly those at the lower end, a better deal. $15 an hour minimum wage. That would get a lot of people off their present $13 and $14 an hour.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member.